Billionaire white family, humiliated black CEO at Gala. Minutes later, she erased their $4. 9B deal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Serve us drinks, ape. The words cracked through the golden ballroom like a whip, sharp, wet, humiliating. Laughter burst from the circle of elegantly dressed socialites, their champagne glasses trembling with amusement. Crystal chandeliers flickered above them as if embarrassed to shine on the scene unfolding beneath. She stood at the center of it, the black woman in the white off-shoulder gown, phone still raised near her ear, frozen mid-call. Not because she didn't know how to respond, but because the cruelty was so casual, so confidently delivered, it briefly stunned the air itself. The blonde woman leading the pack, lips glossy, eyes sparkling with entitlement, leaned forward, giggling as she repeated, louder this time, ensuring every nearby table heard, "I said we're waiting. Hurry up! Bring us drinks! You people should be good at that!" Her friends erupted again. One man wiped tears from the corner of his eye, laughing so hard he nearly spilled his wine. Another nudged his partner, whispering something that made her choke on her breath before both dissolved into snickering. All around them, guests turned, some curious, some entertained, none intervening. Phones rose subtly, screens glowing like predators' eyes. A few recorded openly. Others pretended to check their messages while angling their cameras just enough to capture her humiliation. For a moment, she didn't move. Her jaw tightened. The muscles near her temple pulsed. The white dress she wore, a clean, sculpted line of elegance, seemed to hold its breath with her. Behind her glassy stare, a storm gathered. Not loud, not feral, but structured, like something engineered. The blonde lifted her flute. "Oh, come on," she said sweetly. "Don't look at us like that. You're at the wrong table anyway." Another round of laughter. Someone muttered, "Classic," as if this were merely expected entertainment at a billionaire's gala. The woman in white lowered her phone just slightly enough to reveal the shift in her expression. Calm, cutting, controlled. She scanned the circle of faces, each one confident in their superiority. Each one certain they were speaking to someone beneath them. None of them knew her name. A string of violins wavered overhead, the musicians stumbling as the tension rippled through the room. The light dimmed a fraction. Something cold crept across the marble. She exhaled slowly, then raised the phone again, not to comply, not to retreat, but as if she were about to rewrite the oxygen in the ballroom. Before she could speak, the narrator's voice slid in steady, cinematic. "Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story." Her eyes lifted again, colder now, focused on the blonde who believed cruelty was currency. And then the narrator's voice returns with the required mid-hook line, low and ominous. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe." These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. She straightened, dignity radiating from every inch of her frame. The circle of guests kept laughing. Not one of them realized. She wasn't frozen. She was deciding, and in minutes, she would erase their entire world. The laughter didn't fade all at once. It frayed like silk tearing under too much tension. The blonde woman's giggle thinned first, tapering into an awkward trill as she noticed something changing. Not in the room, in the woman she had just insulted. The black woman in white stood unnervingly still, her posture gathering itself with a grace that was almost architectural. The kind of grace that didn't just occupy space, it redirected it. Then came the silence. It wasn't total. Violins still played, glasses still clinked, Waiters still wove between tables, but the soundscape shifted, notes stretched, chatter softened. The very air around them cooled, not physically but socially, like the gala itself was reconsidering its choices. The blonde frowned. "Why are you staring like that?" It was a joke, but it wasn't a question. It was the first whisper of fear. Her friends exchanged glances, not guilty ones, but confused. They had expected anger, tears, an outburst, a retreat, something human, something predictable. But what they saw instead was composure sharpened to a blade. The woman in white slowly lowered her phone. Not dramatically. Not for attention. Just enough for the gold light to catch on the screen, a faint glow hinting at a message, a command, a world behind the glass. Her gaze swept through the circle of smirking faces. One by one, they flinched without realizing why. Her eyes carried no fury, no tremble, no wounded pride, only precision. A young man in a navy tux whispered, "Chez," weirdly calm. His girlfriend elbowed him. Don't stare. You'll encourage her, but he wasn't staring out of curiosity. He was staring because something deep and ancient inside him, older than wealth, older than arrogance, was warning. You just made a mistake. A violin string snapped across the room with a sharp, brittle twang. Even the orchestra felt it. The blonde straightened, forcing her smile wider. "Relax. You're taking this too seriously." But her voice betrayed her thin, shaking at the edges. The woman in white didn't answer. Instead, she turned her head slightly, listening to something no one else could hear. The quiet hum of repercussions forming, aligning, preparing. Her breath steadied, her shoulders settled. Her expression crystallized into something cold, immaculate. The kind of calm that only exists before a seismic shift. Someone behind her murmured, "Who is she?" No one knew. No one bothered to know until now. The blonde rolled her eyes, trying to reclaim control. "Honestly, you people are always so dramatic. If you didn't want attention, you shouldn't dress like a—" She never finished the sentence, because the light changed. Barely a small flicker in the chandelier above them, like a warning pulse. A shimmer that bounced off marble, glass, and gold. A shimmer that seemed to outline her, the woman in white, as if the room itself were acknowledging something that the guests had missed. Power. Not the loud kind, not inherited, not decorative, but earned violent in its silence, inevitable in its timing. The blonde swallowed. "Why are you looking at me like that?" The woman in white didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't rise to the insult. Her stillness became the threat. In the reflection of her eyes, the blonde didn't see a server, or an outsider, or an easy target. She saw consequence, the first ripple of it, the first outline of a future about to collapse. She saw the exact moment a $4, 9B empire began to die long before she knew its name, long before she realized she had been laughing at the wrong woman, long before she understood that humiliation isn't a weapon, it's a trigger. People thought the shift in the room came from embarrassment, from tension, from a social line crossed. They were wrong. The shift came from her, from the truth, pressing up against the edges of her silence, ready to reveal itself like a blade sliding free of its sheath. Her name was Ava Montgomery, but no one in that laughing circle knew it. Not the blonde in the crimson dress. Not her champagne-soaked friends. Not the guests watching like spectators at a sport. They only knew the surface, skin, dress, posture. They never imagined they were humiliating someone whose influence could tip the architecture of their financial world with a single gesture. Ava had built an empire the way some people build calluses, through pressure, repetition, and the refusal to break. At 11, she helped her grandmother clean offices after school, scrubbing marble floors just like the ones beneath her now. She learned early that some people step on marble, while others scrub it, and that the ground beneath both groups is the same if you know how to shake it. At 20, she pitched her first startup idea to a boardroom full of men who didn't look at her presentation once. One of them said, "Ambition is adorable, but unrealistic at your level." She wrote his name down not to remember the insult, but to remember the pattern. At 27, she built Montgomery Stratos Holdings from a rented warehouse with 8 employees and a second-hand server rack. Today, it controlled real estate, biotech patents, aviation logistics, and predictive systems technology, a conglomerate valued at over $61 billion. But Ava never bragged about that. She didn't need to. Her grandmother's rule was simple. Power doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. Ava accumulated quietly. She avoided Forbes covers, rejected Gala spotlights, turned down interviews that wanted to paint her as a rare success story. She preferred to be the force behind the curtain, the signature behind the contracts, the woman whose decisions never needed her face attached to them, which is why the blonde didn't recognize her. Why none of them did. Why they mistook restraint for weakness. Why they mistook silence for permission. And why their family, the Aldridges, old money royalty clinging to the image of invincibility, never realized the woman they degraded tonight was the same woman whose signature they had begged for over the past 6 months. Their empire was drowning, declining assets, legal pressure, a restructuring so delicate that one wrong shift in valuation could collapse the entire portfolio. Their miracle lifeline? A partnership with Montgomery Stratos worth $4.9 billion, a deal crafted to save their sinking dynasty. A deal they believed was hours from being finalized. A deal they had toasted to prematurely. A deal they assumed would be theirs because they assumed everyone wanted proximity to them. They assumed wrong. Ava, standing in their ballroom in her white gown, elegant, unshaken, was the only person alive with the authority to approve or erase that contract. The blonde took a step back, unsettled by silence she didn't understand. Ava's fingers slid across her phone with a slow, deliberate precision. It wasn't anger guiding her. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't the sting of their words. It was clarity, the cold calculus of a woman who had survived worse, earned more, and owed them nothing. The Aldridge family saw her as a server. They were about to learn she was the server of consequences. On the surface, the Aldridges sparkled. Old money, old power, old arrogance, polished into a family brand. Their name was etched into museum wings, engraved on hospital plaques, whispered at private clubs as if it were an incantation that granted access to a higher class of oxygen. The chandeliers in the ballroom glowed a little brighter for them, or so they believed. But beneath the gold veneer, their empire was a sinking cathedral, and every laughing face around Ava had a role in its collapse. Evelyn Aldridge, the blonde in crimson, was the embodiment of inherited confidence without inherited competence, 30 years old. A serial investor in ideas that sparkle, none of which ever lasted longer than the champagne she poured at their launch parties. She'd been raised to believe the world bowed not because she earned it, but because it should. Beside her stood Ryan Aldridge, her older brother handsome, well-tailored, carrying the quiet desperation of a man one mistake away from headlines. Had gambled away millions through strategic ventures that were nothing more than boardroom theatrics. His greatest talent was pretending everything was fine while everything burned behind him. Their cousin, Chloe, laughed from behind her wine glass, perfect posture, perfect teeth, perfectly hollow. She floated from event to event, leaving behind a trail of interns, assistants, and waitstaff she treated as though humility were a foreign language. Chloe didn't build anything. She curated herself and called it ambition. And towering behind them was Patrick Aldridge, the patriarch, silver hair, impeccable tuxedo, eyes that measured rooms like he owned the air in them. 40 years ago, his empire had been unstoppable. Now, it leaked from every seam. Lawsuits, misguided expansions, silent partners pulling out, a liquidity crisis so severe the board whispered privately about bankruptcy. But tonight, Patrick smiled, because he believed salvation was secured. Because he believed Ava Montgomery, the unknown CEO head never bothered to research, was about to sign a deal that would pour $4.9 billion into his dying kingdom. He had no idea the woman standing feet away, absorbing his daughter's insults, was the same woman his advisors had been begging him to impress. He had no idea the world he was so proud of was hanging by a thread, and that thread was currently pressed between Ava's fingers, resting against the smooth glass of her phone. It was almost poetic. The Aldridge family saw themselves as benevolent rulers, generous gatekeepers of elite society. But behind the scenes, their accounts had been quietly frozen once already that year. Their lenders were circling like vultures. Their last remaining assets were overvalued, overleveraged, and one economic tremor away from disintegration. Ryan knew it. Chloe knew it. Even Evelyn behind the giggles and champagne felt the unease. But none of them could say it aloud. Not at a gala, not under chandeliers, not while performing wealth for an audience. And especially not while humiliating a woman they assumed was beneath them. Patrick Aldridge raised his glass across the ballroom, unaware his children were laughing at the one person who could save them. Unaware that every joke, every sneer, every ape he didn't hear was pushing his family closer to the edge. Unaware that the person they were degrading was not just a guest, she was the verdict. Ava didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand an apology. She didn't even look at Evelyn Aldridge again. Because humiliation was not the moment that defined her. It was the moment that revealed them. And now, finally, she had seen enough. The violins trembled through a shaky transition, as if the musicians themselves sensed the pivot in the air. Conversations dimmed to murmurs. Even the chandeliers seemed to hum with a faint electric tension. Ava lifted her phone to her ear. No theatrics, no dramatics. Just a simple, quiet motion, the kind people dismiss until they realize too late it was the start of an earthquake. Evelyn blinked. "Are you seriously making a phone call right now? I wasn't finished talking to you." Ava didn't respond because she wasn't talking to her. A single beep sounded as the call connected. "Miss Montgomery?" Her assistant's voice, crisp and composed, came through instantly. She was always ready, always near her phone, because working for Ava meant living one breath away from decisions that could rearrange entire financial landscapes. Ava's eyes swept across the ballroom, pausing at Patrick Aldridge, who still mingled blissfully unaware. At Chloe, who whispered something cruel behind her glass. At Ryan, who tried to look important. At Evelyn, who still wore the smugness of someone who believed she had just won something. Ava inhaled once. Slow, measured, final. Pull the deal. Effective immediately. The assistant hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough to confirm Ava meant what she said. "What?" "All of it, Mom. Everything. A beat. Understood." And just like that, the first domino fell. Across the city, servers inside Montgomery Stratos headquarters lit up with automated alerts. Financial teams received sudden, high-priority instructions. Legal departments snapped into motion, withdrawing signatures, terminating agreements, dissolving pending transfers. One email from Ava could shift the ground beneath entire corporations. One phone call could vaporize billions. Tonight she had issued both. Inside the ballroom, Evelyn scoffed. "Wow, someone's dramatic. Who did you even call? The bartender?" Her friends snickered again, but it was thinner than before, forced, edging into uncertainty. Something instinctual warned them that the air had changed in a way none of them understood. Ava finally lowered the phone. Her expression was not angry, not vindictive, not triumphant. It was resolved as if she'd simply corrected a misaligned equation. Across the room, Patrick Aldridge received a vibration in his pocket. He glanced at his screen, expecting a congratulatory message about the merger. Instead, he froze. A single notification glared back at him. "Montgomery Stratos has withdrawn from all agreements effective immediately." He read it twice, 3 times. His smile dissolved. His posture collapsed inward. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled the plug on his bloodstream. His hand tightened around his champagne flute, knuckles whitening. Evelyn noticed her father's expression from across the ballroom. "What's wrong?" she called out, annoyed. He didn't answer. He couldn't, because the realization hit him like a physical blow. The woman his children had mocked, the woman standing alone in white, the woman Evelyn had called ape, was Ava Montgomery. And the empire he spent 40 years pretending was unshakable had just been dropped into freefall with a single, unraised voice. Ava turned away from the Aldridges, calm, centered, already done with them. Because for her, the moment of humiliation had ended. But for them, it had just begun. The destruction didn't arrive with shouting. It didn't burst through the doors with spectacle or alarms. It unfolded the way avalanches start quietly, invisibly, then all at once. Across the city, in a tower of smoked glass and steel, Montgomery Stratos headquarters came alive like a machine, sensing a shift in gravity. Servers whirred, lights blinked. Entire floors reshuffled themselves around Ava's command. Her assistant, precise, steady, lethal in professionalism, issued the cascade. Priority 1 rollback. Freeze all allocations to Aldridge-linked entities. Terminate letters of intent. Suspend liquidity paths. Notify legal. Within 30 seconds, contracts worth billions vanished from encrypted systems as if they had never existed. Funds previously queued for transfer were rerouted back into Montgomery trust channels. Every digital fingerprint the Aldridges had counted on began disappearing line by line, erased by the silent, orderly storm Ava had triggered. Inside the ballroom, the consequences arrived slower but far more devastating. Ryan's phone buzzed first. He glanced down, expecting notifications from admirers or investors. Instead, he stared in horror at a blinking red alert. Urgent. Line of credit has been suspended. Bank requires immediate clarification on merger termination. His breath hitched. No, this can't. He staggered backward, bumping into Chloe. Chloe frowned at him, annoyed until her own phone lit up. Coleman and Wexler legal withdraws, representation as of tonight. Conflict of interest. Cited. Her stomach dropped. That law firm only did one thing without warning. Abandon sinking ships. Dad, she whispered, voice cracking. Patrick Aldridge received the next hit. His CFO texted, Patrick, what happened? Board members are calling emergency vote. Liquidity status has gone from critical to catastrophic. We needed that merger. Without it, we may not survive quarter end. Another message arrived instantly. Creditors demanding explanation tomorrow morning. Some want answers tonight. Patrick's throat tightened. A tremor ran through his hand, the champagne glass wobbling between his fingers like a confession. And then the press alert. A reporter from a major financial network tweeted, Breaking. Sources confirm Montgomery Stratos may have pulled out of $4, 9B, partnership moments ago. Developing. The tweet spread across the ballroom like a spark falling into dry grass. People began turning, whispering, lifting phones, surprised faces, concerned faces, predatory faces. Evelyn's friends weren't laughing anymore. One slowly lowered her wine glass. Another quietly stepped back. Evelyn herself, still standing in her crimson gown, still painted in entitlement, finally sensed the shift. What is going on? She snapped. Why is everyone looking at us? Then her phone lit up. The screen displayed one line that cracked her world cleanly down the center. Deal terminated. Effective immediately. Montgomery Stratos cites unacceptable breach of professional integrity. Her lips parted. No sound emerged. For the first time, she looked at Ava with recognition not of who Ava was, but of what Ava controlled. Ava didn't move, didn't smile, didn't blink. She simply stood in her white gown, serenity wrapped around her like armor, watching the inevitable collapse unfold. Patrick pushed through the crowd toward her, voice trembling. Miss Montgomery, Ava, this must be a misunderstanding. We can discuss this privately. Ava turned her head slightly, not enough to honor him with her full attention. Respect, she said softly, is not a misunderstanding. The words landed heavier than any shout. Behind Patrick, the room fragmented into chaos. Investors calling assistants, assistants calling their firms, donors demanding answers, journalists rushing toward the exits to file breaking stories. The Aldridge dynasty, once the immovable centerpiece of the city's elite, was dissolving in real time, under chandeliers that suddenly felt too bright, too revealing. And Ava? She watched their empire unravel with the same calm she had shown when they mocked her. Because this wasn't revenge. It was correction. The ballroom, once a symphony of wealth and ease, now trembled under the weight of unraveling certainty. Whispers thickened into ripples. Ripples swelled into waves. Waves crashed into full-blown panic. It began subtly, a donor lowering his glass mid-toast, brow furrowing at an alert on his phone. Then another gasp from a woman near the balcony. Then a man at the bar muttering, "This can't be real. They lost $4.9 billion?" Suddenly, the screens in the media corner lit up with breaking banners. Financial networks pushed emergency broadcasts into every handheld device in the room. The Gala's soft gold glow became a spotlight on catastrophe. Hail Network. Aldridge merger collapses, market futures plunge as Montgomery Stratos pulls out. Is this the end of the Aldridge dynasty? The music fractured violins screeching as the musicians glanced in confusion at the guests abandoning their seats. A waiter stumbled, nearly dropping a tray as panicked voices filled the once pristine hall. Ryan Aldridge clutched his forehead, pacing in small, frantic circles. This can't be happening. We had hours. We had tonight. His tie hung loose, his breath unsteady. Dad, do something. Chloe scrolled through message after message, each notification a fresh dagger. Sponsorship withdrawn. Partnership review terminated. Pending approvals canceled. Aldridge Holdings outlook, negative. Her voice cracked. Why is everyone backing out at once? They couldn't have known this fast, but they had known. Because Ava's decisions didn't echo, they detonated. Across the hall, Evelyn stood frozen, her crimson gown suddenly too bright like a warning flare marking the precise location of collapse. Her lipstick quivered as she whispered almost inaudibly, "Dad, what did she do?" Patrick Aldridge didn't answer. He couldn't. Every phone in his pocket vibrated relentlessly. Board members, attorneys, regulators, journalists. His empire wasn't slipping away. It was being pulled out from under him. Ava watched from a quiet corner, unmoving, serene amid the chaos she did not need to elevate. Power didn't require volume. It didn't need spectacle. It needed a moment, a decision, a boundary crossed. And she had given the Aldridges exactly what they asked for. Evelyn stumbled toward her, desperation replacing arrogance. "Miss Montgomery, Ava, please. We didn't mean—" She swallowed. Hard. "It was a joke. People joke. You can't destroy us over that." Ava lifted her gaze slowly. "There is a difference," she said, "between a joke and a worldview." Evelyn's breath hitched as if slapped by a truth she'd never been forced to confront. Behind them, investors streamed toward the exits, muttering about losses, risk mitigation, distancing themselves before the Aldridge name became financial poison. The clatter of heels and hurried footsteps drowned the fading music. One woman whispered to her husband, "Their credit rating just got downgraded mid-event." Another hissed, "This will hit tomorrow's markets like a hurricane." And then came the moment. A photographer, shaky hands, opportunistic instincts lifted his camera toward Ava. This time he wasn't documenting humiliation, he was documenting history. The flash illuminated Ava's face in perfect clarity. Calm, centered, uncompromised. A woman aware of her power, unashamed to use it when dignity demanded. Around her, the ballroom dissolved into disorder, staff unsure whether to stay or flee, donors demanding explanations, Aldridge relatives whisper screaming into phones that no longer offered rescue. The ground didn't just shift for the Aldridges, it disappeared, and the room knew it. Every chandelier, every marble column, every glittering facet of the once invincible Aldridge world now reflected the same realization. The fall had begun, and there was no bottom in sight. The collapse behind her was loud phones buzzing, investors arguing, the Aldridges stumbling through explanations that sounded more like confessions. But Ava's world moved differently. Silent, measured, inevitable. She didn't rush. She didn't flinch. She didn't savor the panic spiraling across the ballroom. Her heels clicked on marble like a metronome, steady, unbothered, carving a path through the disorder without needing to push past a single person. Because the moment she took her first step, the room parted for her. Not out of courtesy, not out of respect, out of instinct. The same instinct that warns animals when they're standing too close to the edge of a cliff. Ava glided through chandeliers dripping gold, past towers of champagne untouched, past faces that avoided her gaze the way people avoid mirrors when they fear what they'll see. She had arrived tonight expecting a celebration. The Aldridges had turned it into a battlefield. But she would leave it with her dignity and without their empire attached to her name. Behind her, Evelyn's voice cracked through the chaos. "Please, Miss Montgomery, Ava, wait." The desperation scraped against the marble. Ava paused, not because Evelyn deserved an audience, but because accountability deserved a witness. Evelyn approached with trembling steps, tears threatening to spill but held back by the last strands of pride. Her crimson gown, once a symbol of power, now clung to her like a reminder of a stage she no longer controlled. "You can't do this," Evelyn whispered. Her voice was small, unfamiliar. the voice of someone who had never been told no, not truly. You can't destroy my family over a misunderstanding. Ava turned fully this time, the soft glow of chandeliers outlining her silhouette like a verdict written in light. Your misunderstanding, Ava said quietly, was believing you had the right to measure someone's worth. Evelyn flinched. Ava continued, her tone level but weighted. You didn't just insult me. You didn't just humiliate a stranger. You exposed the foundation your family stands on. Evelyn's lips trembled. We can fix this. Well, apologize. Publicly. Privately. Whatever you want, Ava shook her head gently. I don't want an apology. The room held its breath. I want standards. Those two words landed like a stone in Evelyn's chest. Ava stepped closer, not threatening, not towering, simply present in a way that dismantled every shield Evelyn had ever used. Respect is not a negotiation, Ava said. It is the price of admission into any partnership with me or with anyone who understands the value of a human being. Evelyn's mascara blurred. My father, hell lose everything. Ava's expression did not harden nor soften. It remained exactly what it had been since the start, principled. Then he taught you the wrong lesson, Ava answered. Power isn't inherited, it's exercised. And tonight, you exercised cruelty. Evelyn's knees weakened. Please. Just reconsider. Ava's gaze drifted past her, taking in the hall the trembling investors, the frantic managers. Patrick Aldridge collapsed into a chair with his head in his hands, and for a moment, Evelyn thought she saw mercy. But mercy was not the same as reversal. Ava spoke one final truth, a truth heavy enough to reshape futures. Actions, Miss Aldridge, are loans, and tonight your family defaulted. Evelyn's breath broke. Ava turned away, releasing her from the weight of the moment, but not from its consequences. The walk toward the exit resumed, and something remarkable happened. Staff, who earlier had been invisible to the crowd, now watched Ava walk by with quiet awe. A waitress straightened her posture. A security guard stepped aside with a nod that carried gratitude rather than protocol. A young intern whispered, "That's who I want to be someday." Not because Ava destroyed an empire, but because she refused to shrink in front of one. Near the doors, the cold night filtered through the glass, carrying snowflakes that drifted down like punctuation marks on the evening's final sentence. Ava paused at the threshold. Not to look back, not to reconsider, simply to reclaim the night she had been denied. Behind her, Evelyn collapsed into a chair, sobbing silently into her hands. Patrick argued desperately into a phone that was no longer picking up. Guests whispered, documenting the disintegration of a dynasty in real time. Ava stepped into the winter air, breath steady, gaze forward. This was not revenge. This was restoration. The restoration of dignity, of boundaries, of the simple truth that power does not come from the height of a chandelier or the weight of a last name. Power comes from the person who walks away unbent, unbroken, unbothered, leaving the world to reconsider the cost of underestimating her. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Aldridge dynasty collapses overnight, $4. 9B. Deal shattered after Gala. Incident insiders claim unforgivable breach of integrity. Montgomery Stratos withdraws. Market trembles. Financial networks ran split screen. Coverage. On one side, Patrick Aldridge, arriving at an emergency board meeting, shoulders bent under the weight of consequences. On the other, Ava Montgomery stepping out of her car hours earlier, calm, composed, untouched by the panic she had left behind. The contrast was poetic, and everyone saw it. Investors fled the Aldridge empire in waves. Creditors demanded immediate restructuring. 3 subsidiaries filed emergency protection within 24 hours. The board called for Patrick's resignation before the week ended. Every camera, every analyst, every commentator repeated the same question. How did a single decision dismantle an empire? But those who understood power didn't ask that. They asked, what kind of woman walks away with that level of clarity? Ava didn't appear on interviews. She didn't post a statement. She didn't leak a memo. She simply worked. At Montgomery Stratos, she redirected the entire $4 9B allocation with one email, this time towards something that did deserve her signature. A new fund. A large one. one she had quietly dreamed of building for years. The Rose Initiative, named after her grandmother, the woman who scrubbed floors in skyscrapers that Ava would later own. The purpose was simple: to invest in women of color launching companies across tech, real estate, medicine, finance industries that had historically shut them out, underfunded them, underestimated them. Within days, Rose Initiative became the centerpiece of every business journal. Applications flooded in. Other CEOs pledged matching contributions. Several major universities requested licensing partnerships for accelerator programs. Power redistributed with precision. And Ava never once mentioned the Aldridges. Not in the mission statement. Not in the meetings. Not in the interviews she declined. Because the story was never about them, it was about what dignity can build and what arrogance can destroy. Across the city, Evelyn Aldridge sat in her penthouse, curtains drawn, scrolling through social media posts, discussing her fall from grace. Clips of her mocking Ava were set side by side with clips of Ava leaving the gala in quiet command. Thousands of comments contrasted the two women not by wealth, but by character. Evelyn finally understood the truth her family had refused to learn. Power isn't the spotlight. It's the shadow that determines where the spotlight falls. Meanwhile, in a modest community center far from the chaos, Ava stood beside a group of young entrepreneurs. No cameras, no velvet gowns, just ideas, grit, and futures waiting to be built. A young woman asked quietly, "Miss Montgomery, why help us? After everything?" Ava smiled, not the polite smile she wore at galas, not the strategic one she used in boardrooms, a real one. "Because someone once helped me when the world didn't see my value," she said, "and because power means nothing if it only serves itself." Snow continued falling outside, soft, steady, erasing footprints on the sidewalk, but not the path she had carved. The Aldridges had lost an empire. Ava had built a legacy. And long after the headlines faded, one truth remained carved into the marble of that ballroom, into the memory of every witness, into the spine of every future entrepreneur. Respect is the only currency that never loses value. And she was the one who set the exchange rate.